Back in 2006, we had a Hmong neighbor who moved in next door. I remember that during that time their father was always sick. In the 2 months they lived there, we would often see an ambulance come and take their father to the hospital. We didn't know what kind of sickness he had. They only lived there for 2 months before moving out. We didn't know if the house they lived in was haunted or not. Why did they move so soon? The area we lived in was not expensive, so their quick departure was puzzling. I remember that in the last week before they moved out, their father was up and walking and even driving. He seemed fine. When they started packing their things, we saw their father helping them pack and carry things into their car and pickup truck. So we didn't understand why he was always being rushed to the hospital. However, before they moved, I believe it was on their last day living in that house, the family performed some kind of religious ritual before they moved. That day, my friends and I were planning to go hunting. My family wasn't home on that day because my father had recently become ill and had started training as a new shaman. They had gone to our cousin's house to learn shaman practices. I was home alone, getting ready for our hunting trip. I had already put on my hunting camo clothes. 6 of my friends were already at the hunting spot, setting up tents and other equipment. We were planning to go hog hunting once it got a little late. Since we lived in Texas, we could hunt hogs at night, as long as we notified the game warden. When my friend Quay arrived at our place, I carried my stuff to his truck. The family next door and their relatives saw that we were going hunting, so 2 of the men came over and said to Quay and I, "We were going to the mountains too, but since it's far and you 2 are going there, could you take a chicken up there for us? We still have a lot to do here, so if you don't mind, I'll give you some money for gas." Quay and I were puzzled and didn't know what the 2 men were talking about. One of the men gave us $200 and asked us to wait while he go get the chicken. He went inside the garage and came back with a chicken in a box with holes on the sides. The man handed me the chicken and told me to keep it on my lap or at my feet and not to open the box. He said they had already performed some religious rites on the chicken, so we were to take it to the mountain and leave it there. Quay and I were young and naive, so we agreed and drove away with the chicken and the box. We were young and didn't understand why the chicken needed to be released far away in the mountains. While driving, I didn't open the box to see the chicken, because I didn't want it to get out in the car. Quay told me there were no wild chickens in Texas. He warned that if people saw us releasing a chicken in the wild, we could get in trouble, so we needed to find a secluded spot. Kay explained that the only wild chicken found in Texas was the Atwater's prairie chicken, which was very different. Hawaii has the chicken similar to the one in the box, but not Texas. We had to be careful about where we released the chicken to avoid getting caught. Once we reached the mountain where we were meeting our friends, there was a straight road with no cars behind or ahead of us. Kue parked on the side, and I got out and carried the box into the bushes. I set the box down, but realized I hadn't asked the men earlier if I was supposed to let the chicken out or just leave the box there. I just set the box down and started walking back because I didn't want to be seen and get in trouble. But as I walked back, I thought maybe I should let the chicken out so it could run around and eat. So I went back, opened the box, and let the chicken out. It was a small brown female chicken. It got out, walked around, and then came back and sat next to the box. As I walked back to the car, I heard what sounded like a man sobbing behind me. I looked back, and the chicken was still sitting there by the box. I continued walking toward the car and heard the sobbing again. I got spooked and ran to my friend's car. Quay asked why I looked so scared, and I told him I thought I heard a man crying in that area. We quickly drove away. When Quay and I arrived at the campsite where our friends were, they had already set up tents and gathered wood. We arrived just as the sun was setting, the time when wild hogs come out looking for food. Hogs are most active just before dark and early in the morning before sunrise. We knew it was dangerous to hunt at that time of day. By law, to hunt hogs at night, we had to use a spotlight. If you live in Texas, make sure to check your area's regulations about night hunting for hogs, as rules can vary. The campsite had wild hogs, which is why we camped there. That way, we didn't have to go far, because once it gets dark, it's hard to find the way back. I remember hearing some wild hogs ahead of me during our short hunt that evening. I slowly approached them without turning on my spotlight, as it wasn't dark enough yet. There were at least 7 or 9 hogs eating and digging for something. I approached them quietly with my rifle ready. They seemed to sense me or smell me, and they all took off running into the bushes, except for one larger hog that continued eating. I thought we would have hog meat for dinner. I aimed at it and shot once, but the hog didn't react. I shot again, but it still didn't fall or run away. I used my spotlight and realized it wasn't a hog. It was a man in black Hmong traditional clothes, lying on the ground as if crying. I got so scared and ran back to camp. When I returned, my friends had already gotten 3 hogs. I was so shaken by what I saw that I told them, and they laughed. They didn't believe me. They told me not to feel embarrassed about coming back empty-handed. We finished cooking some hog meat, and one of my friends offered some to the spirit guardian in the area. It's a religious tradition that we often do or perform while we're out in the jungle, river, or mountains. As we sat down to eat, Kue and I told them about the chicken. The friend who did the religious offering earlier explained that the chicken was part of a voodoo ritual called sending the spirit away. He told us that we were supposed to take the box and the chicken far away, and once we find a place, we have to set the box down. However, when walking back to the car, we were supposed to walk backward so the spirit couldn't follow our footsteps. That night, all of us slept in the tent. Right around 4 a.m. I woke up to the sound of chicken clucking. The sound was loud, even though it seemed far away. It sounded like something was chasing the chicken. I listened for a bit, then closed my eyes to sleep. That's when I heard it, a man's voice saying, "Son, my son, this chicken doesn't crow, but I'm here." I woke up wondering if I was dreaming or if I had really heard it. I listened again and heard it clearly. "Son, my son, this chicken doesn't crow, but I'm here." The voice echoed through the forest, followed by the sound of a man sobbing and crying. I woke up Kue and whispered, "Hey, did you hear that?" Kue said, "I've heard it before you woke up. Just be quiet and listen." We both heard the sobbing and crying again. The voice said, Maybe this chicken is not even a rooster. That's why it doesn't crow. Son, this chicken doesn't crow, but I'm here." That morning, my friends woke up before sunrise, and we went hunting for wild hogs one last time. They were able to kill 2 more hogs before we packed up and drove back to town. Once in town, we split up the meats at one of my friend's place. After that, Kue dropped me off at my house. When I got inside, I put the 2 bags of meat in the sink. My mother and father were still eating at the table in the dining room. My father was eating rice and water with some meat on the side, when suddenly his nose started bleeding into his bowl of rice water. My mother got up to get some napkins for my father. He wiped his nose and then shouted at me, "Where did you guys go hunting? Who's following you home?" I told him where we went hunting and assured him that no one followed me home. I stood there confused, looking at my father wiping his nose. He didn't say or ask me anything else. After that, I went to the garage to take off my hunting clothes, and then went to take a shower. My father, being a new shaman with shamanic spirit guides, seemed to know something was wrong as soon as I got home, which is why his nose bled. I knew I would have to talk to him once I got out of the shower. He would want to know what happened, and he might want to talk to the Hmong neighbors, but I was sure they had already left. There was no car in their driveway. When I came out, my father told me to sit on the couch, and he wanted to talk about our hunting trip. I told him about the box the neighbors gave me and quail to dump in the mountain. I also told my father about what I saw and heard there during our hunting trip. After I talked to my father, he called my mother's father, my grandpa. My grandpa said not to delay and for my parents to get things ready for a shamanic ritual. He would come the next day to perform a ritual. My father was a new shaman, so such matters required an experienced shaman. I was young and naive, not fully understanding what the elders were doing or talking about. But I knew strange things had occurred during our hunting trip. Kuei and I both heard the talking and sobbing that night, even though our other 6 friends did not wake up to hear it. The next day, my grandpa came over with some relatives and a rooster. He put the rooster in a cage on the side as he performed a shamanic ritual. During the ritual, I didn't understand much of what my grandpa was saying, but I picked up a few words here and there. The rooster crowed a few times during the ritual. Then I heard my grandpa clearly say, "I was able to find you because your rooster was crowing. Now that I've found you, don't stay here anymore. Follow the directions I'm providing you, and go reincarnate." As my grandpa was saying this, he was sobbing uncontrollably. My grandma used a towel to wipe away his tears. My grandpa was talking and crying as he met someone in the spiritual realm. I've often saw shamans cry during rituals, and although I didn't understand why, I figured they saw something in the spiritual realm that we couldn't see. When my grandpa finished his ritual, he tied a red string to my wrist and told me not to go hunting that year. He said something had followed me home, and if he hadn't been able to remove it, it would have made us very sick. Luckily, he had removed that spirit from latching on to me. I still didn't fully understand what my grandpa had seen in the spiritual world, or why they used a rooster during the ritual. I wished I knew more about the shamanic practices, but most shamans don't reveal what they see. Some shamanic guides prefer them to keep such knowledge private. I knew my father understood these things. He knew how to observe the ritual, and he understood the shaman's dialogue. I figured I would ask him about it when we go fishing. One day, I told my father that I wanted to go hunting but couldn't. Therefore, I asked if we could go fishing for white bass instead. My father wasn't busy that day, so we packed up and went fishing. While in the car, I asked my father about Grandpa's shaman ritual. My father explained. During the Vietnam War, after the Americans and Hmong lost the war and the country became unstable, villagers started migrating to Thailand. In one village, as everyone was moving, there was a family with a skinny, blind old man who couldn't walk well. The son carried his weak and blind father to the forest and gave him a female chicken. The son told his father to stay there and hold on to the chicken. He promised to return for him when the country stabilized, saying he would find him by hearing the chicken crow. But the chicken was a hen, and hens don't crow. The son purposely gave his father a hen, then took his family and left the village. That's why your grandpa was crying during the ritual. Everything my father said makes sense of what I had seen and heard in the mountains. I started sobbing in the car and unable to speak. According to my father, the blind old man might have died. While other Hmong people were crossing through the jungle where he died, the old man's spirit had latched onto them. A way to get rid of this type of spirit is to do a shamanic ritual and lure the spirit into a box, then take the box far away and leave it there. I want to thank you all for listening to this story. When this event happened, I was scared, and thinking about it still scares me. But knowing that the old man was abandoned in life and again as a spirit makes it even sadder for me. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.